Sometimes, being an emergency dispatcher makes you desensitized against daily problems. I've heard it all: car crashes, house fires, domestic disputes. Well, not because you've lost your empathy, it's quite the opposite, but because somehow you have been trained to be a superhuman, staying calm and delivering the best responses possible while not being able to see the caller. But sometimes, there are some calls that are plain creepy and making you question your sanity. Among those calls, nothing has ever unsettled me like this call. It was just past midnight when the line crackled to life. "Emergency line, how can we help you?" A frantic woman answered, her voice shaking. "Please, you have to help me. My neighbor is trying to break into my house. She's banging on the door. She has a knife." I quickly took her details. Her name was Emily Carter. Her address was 12 Silver Drive. "Stay on the line, Emily. Officers are on their way." She whimpered, then gasped. "She's looking through the window." Static crackled. Then another call came in. I hesitated, but protocol demanded I answer. I switched lines. "Hello? What's your emergency?" A different woman, just as frantic. "Please, I need help. My neighbor is going crazy. She's screaming and throwing things at my door. I think she's dangerous." "What's your address, ma'am?" 12 Silver Drive. A cold sweat prickled my skin. "What's your name?" "Emily Carter." I felt my stomach drop. "Stay on the line," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I twitched back to the first Emily. "Emily? Are you still there?" Her breathing was rapid. "She's still there. I think she's smiling at me." Sirens wailed in the background as police arrived. I listened, tense, as the officers knocked. Then, radio silence. Minutes passed. Finally, the sergeant's voice came through. "Dispatcher, we've secured the scene. One female, highly distressed, but no signs of forced entry. No other residents found." "Understood," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And the second caller?" A pause. Then, "What second caller?" There were 2 calls from that house. Both women claimed to be Emily Carter. More silence. Then, the sergeant's voice turned wary. "We only found 1 woman here. She's adamant that someone was in her house, but there's no evidence of a break-in. We'll bring her in for evaluation." 2 hours later, the police assumed that Emily likely suffered from dissociative identity disorder. Under extreme stress, she may have imagined the intruder or even called us as 2 different people without realizing it. They took Emily away for further psychiatric assessment. I was left staring at my screen, trying to make sense of it. 2 calls, 2 voices, 2 versions of the same fear. Insane. My screen flickered. A 3rd call. From 12 Silver Drive. With trembling hands, I answered. "Emergency line, how can we help you?" A whisper came through. "She's still here." I've sat with this for a while, and I never knew what this thing was, and I would really like some help, or if someone has experienced something like this before, I'd love to hear it. But when I was younger, there was a time my sister, father, stepmother, and I were staying at the Great Wolf Lodge in Sandusky, Ohio. It was at night. I was sleeping in the bottom bunk of the bunk beds, and my sister was sleeping on the top bunk. The bunk beds across the room was my father and stepmother sleeping. I woke up in the middle of the night to seeing my stepmother sitting cross on the floor, but it was exactly my stepmother. What was on the floor was what looked like my stepmother in a dark, shadowy form with red eyes staring at me. And behind that shadow figure of my stepmother was my actual stepmother sleeping in her bed next to my father. I never could figure out if this was some sort of mimic or dark presence. When I was younger, the spooky things seemed attracted to me. This night, I was the only one to witness whatever that was sitting on the floor. I didn't even tell my parents about it until I was an adult. My heart raced as I walked down the street. Though it was 6:45, there wasn't anyone around. It was raining too, and as the rain grew steadily heavier, I pulled up my hoodie and chanced to glance behind me. He was still there. I turned away immediately, ignoring him and walking a little faster. How the hell do I get rid of him? He had been following me around the entire week. I had already gone to the police, and they wouldn't help. In Officer Peralez's words, I had misunderstood the situation. Well, Peralez can stick his donut up his ass. My anger at the police briefly replaced my fear, but only briefly. When I chanced another glance and saw the man still walking toward me, my fear was back in all its glory. My walk had turned to a run, my feet splattering against the muddy pavement. I heard his pace quicken too. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. "Hey, we need to talk," I heard him say. "Leave me alone," I yelled through the rain, trying to keep my voice even without fear. "Hey, stop." But I didn't hear the rest of his sentence. My body was on adrenaline and had already activated its defense mechanism. I looked to my left. I saw a path leading to what looked like the woods. Maybe I can lose him there. I knew these woods like my backyard. I changed course, darting into the trees, and I heard him follow. I ran as fast I could, the trees offering me some protection from the rain. After 5 minutes, I thought I could no longer hear his voice or footsteps. My breathing steadied and I sat down behind a tree to calm myself, wiping some of my hair from my eyes. "Shit," I whispered. "What the fuck was wrong with this guy?" I dug my hand into my jeans pocket and felt my hands clasp against something metallic, my trusty pocket knife. I didn't want to use it, but he left me no choice. I heard him near my hiding spot. I don't think he spotted me, not yet. Alex. He knew my name. That was probably what made me snap. I darted out of the tree and plunged the knife into his stomach in one quick motion. I registered the momentary look of shock in his eyes before he crumpled on the floor, gasping. "Alex," he choked out, raising his hand. My body's defensive mechanism kicked in again, and I plunged the knife once more. His hand went limp. For a few seconds, I was quiet as I watched him die. Then I realized something had fallen out of his hand. A Polaroid. In spite of myself, I picked it up. I was smiling in the picture, wearing a wedding dress. And the man dying in front of me was the one kissing me. Silence in the library. The day after Thanksgiving, I pulled into the parking lot of the massive Benjamin Library in Memphis. 4 stories tall, an enormous building. Yet, the parking lot was completely empty. Not a single car. For a moment I wondered if the library was even open. I had just picked up some food, so I decided to sit in my car and eat. As I unwrapped my meal, I noticed a kid and an older woman walk up to the entrance and slip inside. So, it is open, I thought. After finishing my food, I got out, walked up to the doors, and found one slightly ajar. Pushing it open, I stepped inside. Silence. Not just the quiet murmur of a library. True, absolute silence. No voices, no footsteps, nothing but the distant hum of the air conditioning. Still, I assumed the place was just understaffed because of the holiday weekend. I made my way upstairs, found a comfortable spot and started reading. 2 hours passed. Still no signs of anyone. No librarians, no patrons. Just me, alone, surrounded by endless bookshelves and the dull hum of the AC. The eerie stillness began to creep into my mind, making me uneasy. I stood up and started wandering, peering down aisles, glancing behind desks, searching for any sign of life. 30 minutes of exploring and I found no one. The entire library felt abandoned, yet the doors had been open. Finally, I made my way back downstairs to the lobby. That's when I saw her, a security guard, standing there staring at me. She tilted her head slightly. The library's closed?" I blinked. Wait, what? The door was open. I just walked right in. She gave me a long, unimpressed look, then let out a slow, dismissive, okay, as if she didn't believe me. I hesitated. "How long have you been standing there?" She didn't answer. I waited a beat longer, then turned and walked out, feeling her eyes on my back the whole way to my car. I drove away, glancing once in my rearview mirror. The parking lot was still empty. I was deep in the forest of Georgia, on the south end of the state. I take water samples for the National Wildlife Service. I also look into fauna populations. I was finishing up taking samples when I saw some smoke rising from the trees due east of me. I wonder who's out this far, I mumbled to myself as I put my samples away. I couldn't help but be curious. I had to see what was going on. As I made my way in the direction of the smoke, I couldn't help but smell meat burning. Hunting camp? Hillbilly poachers? Cult BBQ? Are a few things that went through my mind as I got closer to the smoke. It's really uncommon to come across people this far out. Usually it's a bushcraft fishing type if you do. As I get closer to the smoke, I see it's coming from a clearing, a huge crater with a decent-sized flame. I breach the clearing, scanning for people. I see no one. Him standing right in the woodline, kind of hiding behind a decent-sized tree. No one, no movement. I step out and start to examine this flaming burn pit. Moving clockwise, circumnavigating the flaming hole, I see no evidence of people. No footprint, no trash, no tents or hammocks. The pit wasn't huge, 15 feet across and 3 feet deep at the center. After I walk 360 around the burn, I stop and just watch the fire. I see limbs and branches burning, some pretty decent sized. I'm a little on edge. I keep smelling meat. I'm looking deep in the fire, trying to see what is causing the smell. This can't be some meteor strike or caused by lightning. Swamp gas explosion, I thought. Can't be. These limbs are clean cut and bunched up in a dome in the pit. That's when I noticed the edges of the pit were jagged, like shovel marks. I can see how the spade cut deep in the ground and left a smooth ridges in the edge. This is creepy. I don't feel right. My eyes keep scanning the wood line for any movement. Everything is still, no movement, no sounds other than the crackle of flames. All the while I smell smoke with a hint of meat to it. I pull out my GPS mapping device and drop a pin on my location. I start off towards my camp. You'll come back tomorrow and check on this, I thought to myself. It was getting late in the afternoon, and it's not fun or good to be bumbling around in the dark. After getting back to my camp, I put my gear away in my tent and started my small campfire, got my evening meal ready. The entire night, the flaming pit was on my mind. Nothing about it felt right. I went to sleep in my tent, thinking, tomorrow, I'll go back and check out the site before I head back to society. Ma, you be, I'll catch whoever started it. I woke up at 6 a.m. and poked at the coals in my small pit. Once I got the fire going again, I brewed some water for coffee and my breakfast. After I finished, I packed up my camp and stacked my gear in a nice bundle. I grabbed my day pack and my GPS device and headed towards the spot I marked yesterday. I'll come back for the rest of my gear after I do my little adventure. I get to the pit in a decent amount of time, the sun gotten orange and sky. I glance at my watch, 8:30 IEM. I do as I did yesterday. I approach slowly and keep in the woodline. Nothing changed, no sin of any movement, no sin of anything other than a smoldering pit. Everything was burned down and the flames were gone. I step out after about 10 minutes of looking around and look down at the remains. I turn around and grab a decent-sized stick from the brush for poking and walk into the black, burnt, smoking hole. After overturning a few burnt branches and some decent-sized limbs, the flames started to slowly come back to life as the embers hit fresh air. I turn around and get out as the smoke and heat started to make my eyes water. Shit, I didn't want to start it back up, I thought. As I walk out of the center, I turn around, wiping my eyes and stuffy. The now small fire I reanimated. That's when I saw it. On the other side of the limbs I rolled over, there was a black human arm, charred black and melted to the bone. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I started to panic. I turned around and started to leave, but then a thought hit me. It can't be. I turned back around. I'd better make sure and call this in. I walk back into the pit and start poking around with a stick again. I stuck the stick under the arm and lifted. The appendage lifted, burnt, and some meat on the upper arm separated, revealing bone. I dropped the stick and bolted out of the pit and towards the woodline. My mind was racing, my heart was pumping. This was something I have never encountered before. I had heard of people coming across bodies of hikers and campers that have gotten lost, but nothing like this. I got back to my campsite at 10:30 and grabbed my gear and checked my satellite phone. The battery was mostly charged. I called the Forest Service and told them everything as I made my way back out of the wilderness. I gave them coordinates and said I would meet them at the trailhead I came in from, all the while losing my emotions and panicking. I got to the trailhead I came in on around 6 p.m. I was exhausted. By then the adrenaline wore off and the panic subsided. There were 2 rangers at my truck waiting for me. After about an HR or so of me recounting the experience and showing some pictures I took with my phone, they let me leave and said they would be in touch. This all happened 3 years ago. To this day, I haven't heard back from anyone, and when I call and check, they say it's still an open case and can't discuss details. I no longer do that job. I don't camp or fish anymore. Now I sell cars and drink daily. I don't even think I wanna know what happened anymore. My mom and I were on a road trip. I was about 8 or 9 F. There was a man wearing a safety vest on the side of the highway, and he was waving his hands as if he was trying to warn us of danger ahead. So my mom pulled over, and without hesitation, he jumped in the back seat. I remember him talking about inappropriate sexual experiences and fantasies. He talked a lot about nurses at the psych ward finding his kiddie porn. He said that he was in the military and that they had to hitchhike for base training. Nothing he said made sense, but I was too young to really know that. My mom stayed calm, and she says that I made myself very small. I remember he kept trying to talk to me, but my mom made it seem like she was interested in his conversation to keep his attention away from me. She was speeding, and he kept pointing that out. I later learned that she was trying to get pulled over, and I think he knew that too. It started to rain pretty hard, so my mom told him she was going to pull over and let him out at an overpass so he would stay dry. He argued with her for a little bit, but he eventually listened and got out. When I got older, my mom told me just how scared she really was during that experience, I think. We got very lucky that day when he decided to get out of the car when he did.